All right, Jesse, you are going live in 3, 2, 1.
We're talking about Colin Stokes' TED Talk, How Movies Teach Manhood. Stay tuned.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey.
Yo, what up, AfterBuzzers? Welcome to Talking TED Talks. It's your boy DJ Jesse J joining studio.
Whoa, I'm back. It's Yasmine Tamras.
She ain't on the screen. She on the screen, but she ain't on the screen.
Back on the screen next to you. I'm
No,
so
I'm
happy
saying?
to be back, and you got a new hairstyle. That's what.
It's not.
Everybody's
I literally
pointing
just
that
washed
out.
my hair. All right, it's not gelled. I decided not to gel
That's
it.
it. I actually like it.
Thank you.
It looks good.
So today we're talking about how movies teach manhood, and we have a friend and a homie in studio, and you're just gonna fall in love with just everything he says.
Yes, because we have Tehran van Ghasri.
I love how you said my name is perfect, and Jess, I love your new hair. It looks amazing.
Everybody's
Herbal
thinking
essence.
it's new, isn't
It's
it?
amazing.
With some conditioner
Appreciate it.
sprinkled in there, hey? So yes, we do want to present you, and you are a comedian, host, writer, social activist as well.
And when
You're-
it comes to this, I'm actually just a guy. And that's the perfect person to have to talk about male toxic masculinity is Tehran. Like, I would be perfect for this topic.
Well, that's it. I mean, reading about your background as well. I mean, so you're from Washington, and
I'm from Washington, D.C. So
D.C.
not to be confused
Right,
with
this-
Washington as in the state where Seattle is,
boring.
because people do that all the time.
Right.
Seattle's actually a lot of
I
fun.
mean, it's cute. A
Especially
lot
in
of
the
fun?
90s. Especially in
Okay.
the 90s. That's where grunge was born, right?
True.
But I'm from Washington, D.C., where politics was born. And that's where I'm from.
okay, forgive me. I don't want to confuse. It's
messed up,
Washington,
Yasmine.
D.C. I know, I already messed up. First time back, and I'm already messing up.
You could never mess up.
So, you were born, though, to strict immigrants, Iranian, Muslim, and Zoroastrian father. In juxtaposition, your mother, on the other hand, was a liberal African-American, Baptist, and Jewish mom.
This is true. And that's a lot. That's a mouthful. It's a lifeful.
It's a big
just to let
stew.
you know.
It's a big mixed stew right there, isn't it? And then you're also a law graduate.
I have a master's in economics and a law degree, so I'm the most
Jeez.
overqualified comedian
Well, here's the thing.
besides Dr. Ken, who is an actual doctor.
I love how you're basically like the mix of Dave Chappelle and Maz Jobrani.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of like diverse, intellectual, family-friendly type of comedy, and you have your own show at the Laugh Factory on Mondays
True.
and Thursdays at 10 p.m.
But I don't have an accent, so everything I say is not as valid as anything you say.
But you do have an accent.
Do
to
I?
some people.
I have an accent that's just a generalized mannerism in the way that I speak.
No, you have like this dope like stereo voice sound too.
That's
It's
what I
like
wanna
it's like you
say
talk
as
from
well.
right here. It doesn't hit here, but it's right here.
Tell
and
me
it-
more. Tell
I
me
don't
more.
know.
You're so,
It's
it
really
reminds me of
attractive.
Craig David as well.
I like that. And if I was
Yeah.
from London,
He's
I would know who
smooth.
that is. That's amazing. If I was from London in the early 2000s, I would know exactly who Craig David is.
He's
Either that
awesome.
or Idris Elba. Both of those know who Craig David
well,
are.
you fit into that criteria, I feel.
I wish.
And you have your own-
007 Tehran.
Well, you better listen to his podcast, Imperfect Gentleman.
It
as
is.
well.
It's an imperfect gentleman. And I'm not a fan of Idris Elba becoming James Bond. I am not.
Speak on it.
Specifically speaking, and I will say this, I am all about diversity. I'm all about representation. I'm sure we're going to get into that today. However,
get
Idris
into
Elba
that.
being 007 doesn't make sense to me because 007 primarily takes place in Europe. So this is what's going to happen. All those bad guys are going to be like, oh no, James Bond escaped. Where is he? Oh, there he is. It's the black guy. He's the only one here. Look at him. It's James Bond, the black guy. Like, that's all it's going to take in every single situation. I'm trying to save the world here. Excuse me, sir. We had to stop you because we're the police. For what? Because you're black. Like, it's just it's
Now, see,
problematic.
as a
That's
parody, it could
problematic.
work.
Okay, but sorry, I need to
Problematic.
break this conversation up just because when I came to
Sure.
this country, I was heavily shocked by the perspective and
Of
that
what?
and the whole notion of like black versus, I mean,
White, brown, everyone.
white, yellow, whatever. Like, I know in England we have this conversation.
No. That's because you're from London. There's a very big difference. You are from the metropolitan that's the most diverse in the entire world
Highly
and has the
multicultural.
most mixed
But you
couples
know
in
what?
the world
We
as well.
also don't talk about it as much as it's
You do
talked
not.
about here.
Sure, because it's not as much a part of your history. It is a part of your imperialistic programming. So you guys created it, and then America consequentially adopted it. And because of that, it is a part of our culture and our heritage. So yes, we talk about race because race is a defining moment in the history of the United States.
Of our culture too.
It is
though,
a
in
foundation
different
of the United
ways.
States, and that's the difference, to be very honest. In England, it didn't start out racist, it became racist. The United States began with racism,
Right.
and that's why it's
But
different.
you know, we're living in 2019. It
Sure.
should be eradicating or eradicated.
Should.
And you know, London has got a very long history with so many different countries as well. So you know, I think
No. I blame England for all of this. I'm just saying that that's what happened. So if you look at the parent, it's like you can blame the mom, but Psycho was the one who killed everyone.
Yeah.
The mom was the parent, 100%, and the abuse that the mom gave was what caused
Trickled
Psycho
down, yeah.
to be created. But once that happened, Psycho's the killer. That's where we are right now. We are the child. We are the byproduct of unfortunate English capitalism and imperialism.
Well, hopefully lessons can be learned today.
Speaking
in a
of
different
children.
spectrum. Yes, children.
Colin Stokes was the speaker.
Exactly, and he.
I want to get this over before we. Go ahead,
Yes.
give us a little rundown
No.
of Colin Stokes, and then
Okay.
I want to ask Tehran something. Go ahead.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a lowdown as to who our TED speaker was, Colin Stokes actually got a degree in graphic designing from Harvard University and then pursued acting in New York City. He starred on the stage in the long-running off-Broadway musical I Love You, You're Perfect, but now change. He's also been in Shakespeare plays and a couple of Law and Order episodes, but then he had a family, and that led him to become the managing director of communications at Citizen Schools, which is a school that provides support to low-income, mid-income families, those kids that need the support in skills, access, and beliefs for them to thrive and succeed as adults in the modern economy. So that is why he was very passionate about this talk. He also did another talk 3 years ago about the little white lies that we tell our children.
That
Well-
actually would be a really interesting one to see. Watching this though, because I've actually watched two of these kind of similar conversations. One was more so targeted towards Disney. What was your overall take, Tehran, of him as a speaker on this subject?
I loved that he was able to speak on it. I don't know if he made his points as clear as he should, but I will say this ultimately, I would have rather it been Yasmine or Allison who he spoke on instead of him. This was to me a case of mansplaining sexism from a man. And as much as I appreciate allies, as I am personally also an ally, it is not my place. And it wasn't his place in particular. That's all.
I love that, actually. Because I felt the same way. I watched it back, and I think it's a great conversation to spark up and talk about. It was, certain parts didn't really come full circle for me. Moments I kind of left it with, okay, and we were supposed to have another speaker in Dr. Ali, who was going to come in, but she making some coins on a whole nother level, so I couldn't even be mad at that. But she will be in on another day and time. I really wanted to ask that because a lot of these times we do these talking TED Talks, and that's actually a question that we haven't asked the guest or whoever comes in. And I think that's important, you know, realizing I want to get this to be an open table. You know, like I always say, TED Talks was something to me, I came into this late. I thought TED Talks was all about technology, you know, and it was like, oh, here comes this white man just standing up here and he's going to talk to me about what Apple's putting out there or whatever the case is. And when I started understanding how deep these went, I was like, wow, I know I can't be the only person who didn't think this, and I wanted to be able to bring this to a table to have this kind of conversation because I think go ahead.
No, please finish.
We live in a generation where we are trying to make these shifts and we're trying to make these changes. And I went back and he talks about, my dad always says my favorite movie in the world is The Wizard of Oz. He said, because I think it is one of the most groundbreaking movies that has ever been made, and nothing has ever come out like it. everyone tries to replicate, everyone tries to recreate the story. He was like, and so to hear, Colin speak about it and see how his daughter reacted to it and how his son reacted to Star Wars, what was your guys' take on the whole Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, boy, girl, having a lead, a movie that was just done so far back in the days that it was a female lead and it was the women being the hero and the heroine.
Well, I had a very interesting take on that to begin with. But before we get there, I'd love to ask Yasmine the question that you asked me. How did you feel about Colin being the speaker?
Okay. He's a very interesting personality. I found him very stoic in his form. And I enjoyed the fact that he presented his personal narrative. I don't think, personally, I don't think it's wrong of him, that type of a personality, to be talking upon this subject, because it's something he's observed through his kids. That made me think about, my kids, like, what are they going to be absorbing when I have kids? So I enjoyed that. But I do agree with Jesse that there were moments where I was like, okay, where is this leading to? Like, what can we go into a little bit more deeper than that? And I feel through this conversation, we'll be able to dig into it a little bit more, because I found this topic fascinating. Jesse brought it forward and I was like, I love this topic, and the reason why I love it is because I agree with the fact that male in society still suppress a lot. Women are rising above, they're speaking up, but male, given history and circumstances, but there's a certain aspect of, let's say, the feminine side. It's not a feminine, I don't even want to call it a feminine side, it's just a human side that they still don't seek to express because of the way that society has imposed on them to act in a certain manner.
Maybe, or maybe not. So, in my opinion, here's the concept we have to discuss often. We confuse masculinity with toxic masculinity. And one's anthropological and the other is sociological. Now, while gender is a creation of society, sex is not. Male and female does exist. However, the concept of gender, boy, girl, boys like blue, girls like pink, that's a sociological factor in which we've created from nature versus nurture. Masculinity is an anthropological, evolutionary decision that we have all gone through heritage, through genetics. We exist. However, when it comes to toxic masculinity, that behavioral process, if I'm a straight cis male, I will be attracted to an attractive woman. The way I decide to interact with that woman is sociologically dictated, how far I go. So do I grab her and just touch her without permission? Or do I recognize I'm attracted to her and approach her in a mannerism, which is through conversation? It's all dictated by programming, right? So when we look at things and we say, oh, well, movies program us. Yes, they do. Of course they do. But so do our friends and our environment and the world we see around us. It's all one big circle. It's a Venn diagram of cause and effect in which we often find ourselves victims of toxic masculinity because of the world that we live in.
It's everything that you're displayed with: images, music lyrics, peer pressure, and entirely eradicated intimacy within pornography as well.
Do you guys feel that there's a difference where, he talks about the Wizard of Oz, or Disney and things like that. He credited Disney. And then I really had to go back and think of, I did this post, which we'll talk about later, about who inspired you from Disney. And to see some of the answers was interesting to me because a lot of them weren't even human.
Well, Disney's one of the biggest proprietors of sociological programming, right? So let's even look at the movie he spoke about, Wizard of Oz, in which he spoke and he said so profoundly that most of the main characters were women. The heroines and the villains were women. However, at the time that the movie came out, fantasy was also dictated towards women. And since this was a fantasy movie, it was more geared towards women, as in it inspired women or played the same way we would use Barbie dolls to express that. However, if you look at something from, it depends on your personal view, right? So if I look at Wizard of Oz from, let's say, a racial perspective, to me, it's a movie entirely about white privilege. Right. Dorothy comes, lands, kills the Wicked Witch of the East, the Wicked Witch of the West, who is green, and then without saying, oh no, I killed someone, takes her shoes, which are, by the way, not her property, and then goes, they're mine now. and then goes on to try to enforce a change in the Wicked Witch of the West, in which she thinks she's freeing the people, when in fact the majority of the people actually engage and are part of the Wicked Witch of the West regime. They enjoy, the monkeys like her. All the evil characters, which outnumber all the good characters, are actually just her citizens. And whether we like it or not, that's how they decided to run their government. A world in which Dorothy hadn't been there for 5 minutes and decided to assess the entire thing. Now,
But she
does
was
that
a
make it
friendly
true?
person.
Oh, she was friendly.
And then people enjoy that so much more. When
Christopher
over to the
Columbus
nicer
was
side.
friendly. I mean, it just depends on. It depends on.
But the
see,
story, the narrative there, as you can see, as what Colin had mentioned, it's
Sure.
about the whole fact of the leadership being somebody that's likable and friendly and kind.
because we're looking at it from the point of this narrator. So if we read a story, then guess what? When told by an animal, the hunter is the villain. But when you ask the story from the hunter, he's the champion who saved the village. It just depends on whose side of the story we're looking at. If you look at even something, we can look at
It's like
we can
The
look
Wiz.
at any movie.
Not The Wiz. Oh my God, what is it? Wicked,
Wicked.
where it talks about her side
Her
of it,
side.
and it completely flips
And it flips the entire thing,
I
and you see it
actually
from a
enjoyed
different
that story.
perspective. Now, and I'm not saying this because I'm trying to just destroy his argument. I'm not. I'm just explaining that looking at it from a perspective is what gives you perspective. You look at something like The Lion King, and the hyenas are the most evil creatures on the planet. But what did they even want? They just wanted to eat. Like, they were like, everyone can eat except for those hyenas because we don't like the way you look or the things
And you're
you eat.
banished to this dark
And you're
place.
banished to the place with no food. Like, they were literally starving to death. They didn't want to rule the world. They didn't want to take over
but that's
everything.
Scar.
But I'm just saying, in general, this is the thing, is about perspective. Now, do I believe that we need more female representation? Yes, 100%. Female representation is extremely important because representation is extremely important. You brought up the fact that I'm a comedian. The reason that I'm a comedian is because when I was graduating law school and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I turned on the TV one day and I saw a comedian named Mikey Winfield, who's a friend of mine now. And I saw a guy who was light-skinned, black hair, light-skinned, fro hair, black hair, curly hair like mine, looked similar to me, and he was doing a comedy show and then introducing music videos. And I literally said, man, if he can do it, I can do it. And this was me at 20, 21. This was, or actually I was like 22. This isn't me at 12. This isn't even me at 7. How much more do you think it affects a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old? If I'm affected at 22, representation is important. Now, do I think Wizard of Oz is necessarily the epitome of positive representation? I personally don't, but then I think Moana is. I think Mulan is.
Yeah.
I think Brave.
Which is interesting,
Brave is.
okay, because when I was a kid, I had this lunchbox which had the picture of Mulan on it, and then kids would always like say, oh, you look like Mulan because of your eyes, and it would make me feel actually really shy about it. I actually hated it because then I thought, oh, am I seen like a boy then or something, right? Because she's like this female warrior, but as a girl, you're just like, no, I want to be this princess. So I tilted more towards Princess Jasmine or Princess Belle and whatnot.
Yeah, Stockholm syndrome, and of course, abused boyfriend. Sure, you can be programmed to those things too. You have Ariel. It's true, like Beauty and the Beast or Ariel.
No, well, Beauty and
I
the
give
Beast,
up my entire family and everything, and I can't even speak. And this guy meets me and falls in love with me, and I'm willing to give up everything that I know in my life to be with. That's the Little Mermaid.
But most of these
the
are
stories.
fantasy, like you said, fantasy, right? So then when you look at something Mulan, which is based off of history, but then also a little over obviously fantasized.
Sure, but
as
we
well.
believe in fantasy. Do you know how we know? Because religion is a big thing. And even though we don't have proof, we do have faith. And so when we see things and we're programmed with them, we believe them. Well, if you asked a triangle, what's the best shape in the universe? The triangle would undoubtedly say it's a triangle because that's all that they know how to be. And a square would say a square and a circle would say it's a circle. And yet we see that in the universe, we need all of these shapes in order to exist. And that's why I'm saying representation is so important, and so is diversity. And that female voice that we're seeing increasingly in the entertainment space is even more important indeed.
Yeah.
But let's say, because this is about the title being of how movies teach manhood. Do you think these Disney movies or anything out there actually are teaching men to be real great men? Or is there some form of toxicity, can't say the word, toxicity, that is in there?
I think fathers teach manhood. I think the number one thing we see, especially when we speak on criminal behavior, the number one thing you see is, let's look at how your father acted, or if your father was in your life. We see that the most. We know that something as simple as having a two-parent household, it invariably, statistically speaking, not my personal opinion, having two parents, whether they're two males or two females or whatever the situation may be, in a household, having two parents eliminates something like 60% of all things that we call criminal aptitude. It's a very simple statistic. So when you say, is it the movie? Movies taint, but who ultimately teaches? I think it's the men around us. I think it's your father, it's your uncle, it's your father's best friend, it's the boys you inevitably hang out
stepping up
with.
into that
But
position.
that's still, that's the biggest factor. I think as well, Colin does mention that's a byproduct, that entertainment and other facets teach certain characteristics, right? But it ultimately does lie within the family, and this is where he also mentions fathers need to step up to teach their sons properly to love their sisters, to respect women who are standing up for themselves and also becoming stronger and warriors in a sense, rather than fearing them and thinking we need a young, fresh, good-looking woman who is young forever. That kind of perspective. Because a lot of older men still go for these younger women.
Sure,
or
but
like,
that could be
there's
anthropological.
something that's still not aligning in a sense.
But that could be an anthropological idea. It's not as if we lose our sense of attraction because we become older. It's not like older women go in looking at older men and thinking that they're really good looking. They understand the sensibility that some men are unable to have, unfortunately. However, at the same time, we are programmed in order to biologically copulate, in order to procreate, right? So you're looking at someone who's younger and saying, oh, they're more likely to have my child than someone who's not. That's a simple biological factor. It's anthropological. What isn't is sociologically putting, and oftentimes we see an older star matched with the younger star, and that's considered just normal. There's no conversation about it. And that is something that's detrimental.
Taking a choice away.
Exactly. Like if you pair Scarlett Johansson with Harrison Ford, that should be a conversation. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that needs to be a conversation of why this is happening. Why oftentimes do we have a 50-year-old in Hollywood matched with a 25 or 30-year-old, and that's just the normal couple.
But if it's a conversation if it's flipped the other way.
And we do, exactly. If you have it flipped the other way, it actually becomes the entire part of the movie. It's what women want, part 3, or Stella got her groove back, or Cougars for life, or something. So that's the conversation. The conversation becomes then again, who are in these writer rooms? Mm-hmm. Who are the people in these writer rooms? And you find out. I was actually part of a room recently, and for me, it's not so much about misogyny as it is about diversity of race and ethnicity, of course, because that's my personal experience.
Right.
And even though that doesn't mean that I detract from yours being one of sexism. It's equally important.
Mm-hmm. I just want to throw out, because we've got some people in our chat, it's firing off. So Rick's Maze TV News saying that Disney tricked me into believing women were nice. So going back onto something that we
Who hurt you, bro?
Yeah.
Who hurt you?
Home Alone teaches you to beat up burglars. So that's an example of perhaps
Actually, he
positive
thwarts
way of
a
protection.
burglar. He thwarts a burglar.
Yeah.
So.
He's protecting his
And I'm not sure
home.
if you agree with this, but this could be 90s and 80s films taught manhood better than the 2000s onwards. So
I definitely disagree with that.
Yeah.
I definitely disagree with that concept, because if you watch something like The Breakfast Club, who does she fall in love with? Is it the really nice guy or the sweet nerd? No, it's the guy who was the most abusive to her the entirety of the movie. That's that fantasy of the neg, right? The neg is, oh, well, if he hit you at the playground, it's because he liked you. How about we keep our hands to ourselves? We learned that in kindergarten.
And who starts that?
Well, that's the thing. Honestly, who starts that is an anthropological discussion. So we see, once again, not my opinion, when it comes to animals, very similar behavior. And when you look at it on a biological standpoint, you understand it. However, this is the difference between us and animals, is the ability to do 3 things. We use our opposable thumbs. We learn in a community, meaning that I learn from people who have done things before me and people who are around me. I learn how to do things and learn things. And thirdly, that we have the ability to become civilized or do above above our animalistic instinct and above the fray. Now, that doesn't mean we can negate it, but it does mean that we can contain it.
So your personal experience, how did both of your parents teach you to be a man? Like, what was it? Because I do think
have two very different parents, very different backgrounds. And
because I
outlooks.
think, I look at a lot of people who don't, who don't have a father, and they have sometimes a mother who is, not paying attention that she's raising a child. Not that she's not paying attention that she's raising a child, but she's so angry towards him that she forgets to be that positive influence, which you still is to blame on the father for not being there sometimes, you know what I mean, but saying like, oh, no good and all that kind of stuff. So I think it is on both ends of it. So for you personally, what would you say was your personal experience?
So with my personal experience, I had a wonderful father who was at times too much a father, right? So my parents were possibly even too loving. And don't get me wrong, I'm emotionally unavailable like all the other men in LA. However, I just do it better, right? I just handle it a little better. But the concept is, watching my father, I learned certain principles. I learned from him being not extremely conservative, but conservative culturally. I realized things like, when I broke my phone, for example, if I break my phone now, my first instinct is to go buy a new phone. But if my father broke his phone, his instinct, his idea would be, how do I fix this phone? How do I fix that? This is my phone. I need to fix this. And that same mentality translates into a relationship. This is my wife. This is my family. How do I fix this? How do I keep this intact? What do we need to do together? And that's a different mentality, right? So on one hand, that's a good way to be. But on the other hand, if you see cultural conservatism as we need to oppress women, or women shouldn't be allowed to vote, or any of the things that unfortunately are part of our real history and what people forget, current status, then that's an unfortunate byproduct of it. So my father was very much a man, taught me how to work on cars and how to fix things and how to be protective. But one thing that's taught, and this is a very interesting dynamic in the Middle East that people don't realize oftentimes, is that while people are like, oh, they're out there sometimes and unfortunately oppressing women, it's not that we have an idea where we don't trust women. It's that we don't trust the men. And that's a different concept. Now, if you cultivate that concept and understand it, then it becomes better. But unfortunately, like everything else, when added to the masses, that's when it becomes a poor example.
But I don't even think it applies to the Middle East. It's more prevalent there, 100%. However, I will say this, as a woman, late at nights in the dark, when we're walking down the streets, even at home, we don't feel safe.
Of course.
Why do we get that sense, though? We shouldn't be feeling like this.
Possibly. That's also something where you can say it's an anthropological factor. There are scientific studies which consider that. But also, the concept is, when Jess and I leave the club, we just go home. When you leave the club, you have to not get raped and or murdered. When we get in an Uber, we just get in an Uber. When you get in an Uber, Yasmine, you have to get raped and or not murdered. So,
but again,
yes,
where does that come from?
It becomes
society. Because actually, just for me personally, I don't feel that way. I worry about those similar things because they have happened to me.
Okay.
As a gay male.
Well, you're also much prettier than I am, so I don't worry about it as much. And with your new hair, the new hair, I'm so sorry that these things have happened.
Personally, I think it's society. Like, it's because of experience, because even if it hasn't happened to you, you hear things. I grew up in a Greek family where my yaya you're gonna get
your grandmother.
My grandmother. Yeah. You're gonna get salmonella. If you touch that turtle, you're gonna get this. You're gonna do that. You're gonna do that. I didn't want to do nothing, because this is what I have been taught. This is what been instilled in me. So I'm scared of everything. And then going to a city, I was scared. And then I think sometimes we exude that kind of fear too. Like, me personally, as a male, I exuded that fear, and things sometimes came across in my life and happened to, then it was like, okay, I don't even want to go anywhere. And when you experience that, and then you look at it like, okay, well, why does a group of people feel like this? Why do women feel like this? Well, because these are the numbers. He said
1 in 5
people.
American ladies
Women.
had experienced sexual assault.
Yeah, like you hear that number, it's like, well, I don't want to be in this dark alley. I don't want to be in the street.
And he
I don't-
was
Sure.
questioning as well what kind of men are doing this and why.
And here's the problem. It's everyday men.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not looking at it like, sure, there's that one guy who's a creeper. He's like, yeah, I'm here. But on the same time,
Because
there's
you can be
also-
aware of someone
There's
like
also
that.
a regular person who creates an unfortunate circumstance. And that's what we need to stop. But in a lot of things, and this isn't a knock on anything that is actual mental illness, because mental illness is a real ailment. What this is how do you stop crazy? And crazy is craziness when things get out of hand, when behavior becomes erratic, something you cannot count or rely on.
Does
And that is
power stem from
unfortunate.
it?
Of course, it's a part of power. It's a part of desire. It's a part of everything that you can put together. How do you stop that? And if you can answer that question in a lot of ways, it's unfortunate, but it's how do you stop or curtail human behavior?
It's interesting that you brought up power and what you're touching upon there, because there was an article published on Vice by James Squire. University of Zurich, they did this whole research, and they found that men's brains rewarded selfish behavior within the stratum part of the brain, whereas women's brains rewarded generosity.
Once again, who has the babies?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize, like, even anthropologically speaking, it decides why men are more prone to risky behavior versus women. The concept is because I don't have to invest as much time in raising a child as a woman does. If my investment might be 3 to 10 minutes, a woman's investment is 3 to 10 years. Until a baby is able to just walk on its own and live on its own and survive, probably around 7, age 7 is average, where a baby could go and then actually survive. And that investment means why men are prone to risky behavior to denote alpha male behavior versus women. I mean, it's anthropological, but we need to do better.
Well, men need to, but also women, just as you mentioned as well. Say if there's no male figure, the woman has to act as both male and female, that she also has to instill those values into a man. Don't judge
and
the
sometimes
boy.
herself too.
Exactly.
Because I going back into his conversation. I look at, you brought up Beauty and the Beast, right? And back in growing up, I loved it. It clocks and
Singing
the
candles.
fantasy
Who
things.
doesn't
I
love
wasn't
singing candles?
thinking about I never thought about the relationship
she's
between a man
saving a
and
beast.
the woman, and maybe that was.
Outwardly, you didn't, but subconsciously, we realized that children, which is why you're able to learn languages when you're a child. Think about what you go through from age 0 to age 5, the things that you're able to learn that you would never be able to do or accomplish now. You learn things through simple context, including all of language, right? It's simple context. You have no other
Well, and understanding
preface
too,
of understanding.
like you and we grew up with families where this is a movie, this is not reality, this is fantasy. Understanding that when watching it, because I like you grew up in a household of immigrant parents who it was. This is love. My parents have been together for 40 years. This is how a man treats a woman, and this is how she treats her husband. Like, it was very equal. My father is,
That's if you're exposed to that. Yeah.
yeah.
That's nice.
And so, but going to that now as an older, being in a relationship and looking back at something like Beauty and the Beast, and it's like, as a woman, as a girl, how would I ever know what type of man to ever, if I didn't have that male in my life? Like someone like my father to show me what unconditional love is in a positive aspect.
Was all
And
this
that
just to
is
tell
through
us you're
your
in a relationship?
peers.
I feel like
I'm
it
not
was.
in a relationship. I wish.
But that's through your peers then.
But peers. But with these movies, I look at it like, look at something like Beauty and the Beast, which is so praised upon. But here's Belle, this woman who's, she's adventurous and, she'll go and she'll
Goes out on her own
yeah,
into the woods.
But does she? Because then she meets this man who she understands, like, oh, he's angry and mean and abusive, but it's because of something. And
I have to fix him.
I have to fix him.
But
She
also
fixes him,
because
but
she
then
can
look at
feel the
Gaston.
underlying
Yeah, but I
heart there,
disagree
yes.
with you about something.
Okay,
Yasmine.
but then let me just say
Please.
about this. Then, if the roles were
Look, this is
reversed,
her hero. Belle. I wanted to be Belle when I was there.
I actually had the dress and everything. There's pictures out there. If the roles were reversed, though, if let's say the Beast was female and the guy, this was the hero's journey, who's the guy, How would you feel about that?
But it is. You look at Melissa and the Maleficent.
We see that all the time. We see that in every marriage.
Maleficent is female again.
No, we see that in every marriage story that exists. So
You
the
don't
concept
see
is
that kind of
yes, you do, because
reversal, though.
in
What
the
the-
concept of a
characteristic
marriage, let's look at Al Bundy. Peggy's horrible. Peggy's this. Peggy's the beast, and I'm the male savior in a way.
Yeah.
And sure, it's a humorous take on it,
Not
but that's
savior.
the concept.
It's not even the savior, though. It's actually just a person of love and nurture to be for somebody there that is actually horrible.
Well, then
that has a heart.
Then Belle would have found a person who's suited to her and not someone that she had to change or fix. And that's the concept. That's what we need to not push. The narrative of love is hurt. It is not. And that's the
Agreed,
concept,
there
because
isn't
so
that,
many
but
people are
that's-
hurt.
I mean,
and when
I
you
get
said
it.
something, Yasmine, when you said, oh, well, then the families where the mom has to step up and then take on that role. No.
Yes,
no.
women do have
No, they
to.
don't. Women do enough. Women breastfeed us and we're like, no, don't do that in front of us.
Listen,
and
I
women
am a
create and they
woman.
push a human out of their body. Here's the thing. We have these words for women who have children without a husband. She's a slut. The child's a bastard. But what do we call the guy? Rick. We don't have a word for him. He just left. Rick left. There is no word. We need to stop.
There is a
that
word we don't
narrative.
tie it to.
Yeah.
A bastard. You know what I mean?
No,
But-
bastard's the child. The bastard is the child who doesn't have a father. That's what that literally means. But Rick, there is no actual word. There is no word.
Deadbeat. But it's not as harmful.
That's like saying
and tied to-
cracker to the N word, right? So here we have these harmful words. We give our women so much responsibility. Step up. You want to be a man? That's how you do it. Step up.
Exactly. I agree.
Be a man. Step
but if
up.
the man isn't there, then the woman has to.
And then what we have to do is
And the
change
women
the fact that the man isn't there.
Yes.
That's what we need. Instead of saying, well,
Which is what he said, the new manhood.
Change-
The new definition of manhood.
change it. And I don't mean to do this in a mansplaining way. I'm doing this in a way that maybe possibly you were programmed by Belle, and I'm trying to undo some of that programming, because that is not how it works.
I just love.
Trying to
I was just
fix
with
things.
Stephanie. I wonder what Stephanie's.
Listen,
favorite-
as the consummate F-boy, I'm letting you know that's not how it works. It's not how it has to be.
Okay.
And that's the case. And when it comes to
I feel like I'm in therapy.
toxic masculinity, we have to it's like if you were toxic on the inside, what is that? Cancer, right? We need to detox. We need to detox as a society.
That's it. I mean, as well, you know, when you're listening to, I don't know, smooth tunes, or if you say something that might be a little bit mushy, have you ever experienced that as growing up, as a young boy, being like, oh, you're being too soft right now?
No, I don't. But I can understand that. Like I could. No, look. I've cried twice. One time when Fresh Prince's dad left, and
see, what is the issue with that?
it's no
There's
issue.
no
That's-
issue.
but
It's a
here's the thing.
personal.
It's
Like
a
it's,
personal.
I cry all the time.
For
You're
me,
gonna cry more.
Don't put
for me,
pose
it's
on.
personal.
Yeah. Okay. Are we gonna quickly?
Yeah.
Get into
So really quickly, so we do the teddies every week. So let's get into our Twitter polls.
So our first question was, which Disney character did you identify most when you were growing up? And we had a lot of different. I mean, every
This
type
was-
of
you guys
Disney
love this
character.
question.
Yeah, we had Aladdin, Cinderella, Tarzan, Pocahontas, Darkwing Duck, and there were a couple of really interesting answers here. Which one you mentioned was the no one.
They said no one had my skin color, so no one.
Then Goody, because they were hilarious. Goody. Goofy, because they were hilarious, but still had responsibilities under one roof.
Which is actually really funny that out of all the Disney characters, he's the one that got the storyline with a family. I don't know why. That's
there was something that
because
you-
Mickey was supposed to be like the biggest one out of all of
Yeah.
them, but he never. He just had the girl. But Goofy was the one to have that whole family aspect.
family.
Oh, that's just.
Yeah, at least they got pants. Let's go.
Well, that's it.
And then there was Mulan, of course, who is the OG female warrior. Second question was, do Disney cartoons portray a healthy manhood? 15% said yes, whereas 85% said no. So there's definitely a realization point in there. I don't know if my picture as well kind of instigated that, because Aladdin
No,
is
that
a
was
liar.
actually that picture was really dope. I tried finding that on my own.
You gotta
Oh
go
my-
on at Talking TED Talks just to see those polls with those pictures. They're quite cool. The
Yeah.
final question was to men: do you feel pressure to uphold a certain characteristic of manliness? And 64% said yes, whereas 36% said no. And I think, I mean, I'm not gonna name anyone, but I feel like the ones that said no were the ones that really knew themselves and held their stands no matter what. Like, they don't really care.
The ones that said no on mine were female, and I was like, well, stop trolling me, guys.
But I think, it has a lot to speak for the way that our society has been constructed and the things that have been showcased to our kids and the way that we've been educated from such a young age.
Yeah.
I feel like we should end with our tangible tools, on simple tools on how you can really teach manhood in a proper way. As you were saying, men teaching their sons and...
None of us have children, correct? Tehran.
Allegedly.
Okay, allegedly.
No, I have no children.
To peers.
I don't care what you say, Maury.
Is there what's something I would like to say that because I think that it's theme of the day is having conversations. You see a lot of people who they run from conversations of peers because it's difficult. They don't understand it and they don't want to sit and listen to why Belle and the Beast and all this and toxic masculinity. What are tangible tools that we can do as people to starting this type of conversation and pushing?
If you're asking me, I don't know. And the first step is admitting that I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to teach my son how to be a man, but I promise that I'll teach my son how to be a good human being. And I think that might be the first step. It's just being a good person. Literally, being a good person is such an invaluable trait that we should hold in high regard, and yet often we forget. Instead of thinking of manhood, I'm just going to teach my son and my daughter humanhood and go from there.
I like that. I was going to say... teach your boys it's okay to cry. Just cry anytime.
Kind of anticlimactic after my mic drop.
Right, yeah, you got a whole mic drop.
And just don't let those feelings be bottled up. I do believe that men have a tendency to bottle things up, and that's something that...
And it can shift sometimes what that emotion is to something else.
Yeah, and it was interesting because when we had Chandrish come into the studio talking about... It was about the topic of long-term desire. He said that when men try to meditate in this area, they're blocked. They're completely blocked because they
my ovaries tend not to do well with meditating in that area.
Well, it's still your manhood there.
It's a little lower, but I would say language. The one thing that I just did 2 other shows, and this similar conversation was language. And one thing personally that I am working on right now is understanding that there was a block of my life that I didn't get to be myself or in the full capacity of understanding who I was as a person and understanding that society didn't see that. And I catch myself saying boy and girl to people like, oh, we're just boys, we're just, girls and things like that. And it's like, I'm a man. And women. And
there's nothing wrong with being a girl.
Huh? No, there's nothing wrong with being
I'm just saying, because that's the concept.
But changing verbiage, because even
if people
like
have a problem with the word girl, to me, it's like I have a problem with you. You have a problem with the word girl, but the word girl is a strong...
But respect I agree with that. And respecting it, because even like there's things like, someone using the word gay as in a negative term. It's like I've used that. Like, oh, that's gay, but understanding like how that affected me in high school by using that, it made me more ashamed because it meant less than.
Yeah, but there's nothing more gay than a straight guy, so I don't know.
That's the thing. Sometimes the truth.
That's a real true thing to say.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
But yeah, Tehran, thank you for coming through and sharing your voice, your knowledge, and everything. Your honesty.
Very insightful.
Listen, what do I know?
No, because I could just literally just sit and just listening and just stare at you for hours.
Just learn about all the anthropology and sociology and history of the world.
Just my opinion. I'd like to say that my opinions do not reflect the attitudes of AfterBuzz or its affiliates.
But where can people go to hear your opinions?
Well, you can, of course, find my opinions all across the board at I Am Tehran, IAMTEHRAN, because that is who I am. And also, I host and panel a slew of other AfterBuzz after shows because all of your favorite TV programs are my favorite TV programs, too.
And The Imperfect Gentleman.
Of course.
Yes.
And which, by the way, Imperfect Gentleman, just to let you know, it's myself and my co-host George Corey, who's also a AfterBuzz host, and every week we bring 2 female panelists to discuss how we can become better men.
Okay, well, I'll put myself up next time.
Would love to have you.
Thank you. Okay, well, you can find me at Yasmine Tanris, and please do give us 5 stars on iTunes if you are listening through podcasts as well. Yeah. And where can we find you, Jesse?
Well, and if you guys are watching on YouTube, please leave a comment. Just join the discussion. You guys can hit me up at DJ Jesse J and hit us up at Talking TED Talks across all social media platforms. Shout out to Rick's What is it?
Rick's Mace TV News
You
and Ryan Nilsson.
join the conversation.
And Meek Mill and Megan Gallagher as well.
Meek Mill. Oh, Megan, you was a guest here.
Yes.
Thank you. We
Thank you so
appreciate you
much.
guys. Also, check out AfterBuzz TV across all social media platforms. Till next week, same time, same place.
I was just thinking Drake would have joined the conversation, but he couldn't find a ghostwriter. Yeah, I said it.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.